I laughed. Rich men do not know how to please a woman. But then, the billionaire behind me leaned in and said something I will never forget. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us get back to our main character. It was a Friday night in Manhattan, the kind that felt alive from the sidewalks to the skyline. The rooftop bar shimmered under strings of warm lights, the city humming far below. Music thumped softly through the floor. The air smelled of citrus and gin. At a corner table, Riley Moore laughed with two friends from her freelance job, her hair tied up carelessly, the shine in her eyes trying to hide exhaustion. Her second-hand dress looked almost elegant under the golden lights, even though she had stitched the torn hem herself that morning. They were joking about dating apps and Wall Street men who bragged about bonuses as if they were personality traits. One friend rolled her eyes, saying, "They think money fixes everything." Riley took a sip of her drink and said it louder than she meant to. Half angry, half amused. Rich men do not know how to please a woman. They only know how to please their egos. Her friends burst into laughter. But behind her, at the next table, a man looked up from his phone. Dark hair, rolled up sleeves, a quiet calm that made him stand out in a crowd full of noise. He heard every word. He waited a beat, then leaned slightly closer, voice smooth but low enough for only her to hear. "Maybe," he said. "You have just been meeting the wrong rich men." Riley froze, then turned around, her eyes meeting his. He had that steady kind of confidence that comes from power but not arrogance. Still, she smirked to cover her surprise. "Let me guess, you are one of them?" He tilted his head. "Depends. Do you judge all men by their tax bracket?" Her friends whispered, giggling at the tension. Riley's cheeks warmed, but she would never admit it. "No, just the ones who try too hard." He smiled slightly. "Then I will try not to try." For a second, something hung between them, an unspoken challenge. The music faded into the background, and all Riley could hear was her own heartbeat. Then her friend nudged her, reminding her to grab the next round. Riley turned away, brushing off the moment like it was nothing, but her hands trembled slightly as she lifted her glass. When the bill came, the man had already left. Only his empty glass remained, and beside it something she did not notice yet. A small leather notebook resting on the edge of her seat, its pages filled with her own handwriting. The notebook she carried everywhere, titled, "Things I Wish Men Knew." Outside, rain began to fall lightly over the city, the kind of rain that blurred lights and reflections. Riley laughed one last time, unaware that the stranger who had challenged her words was about to change the course of her life. Because sometimes, a single sentence, spoken in defiance, is the beginning of the most unexpected love story. The next morning, Riley woke to the sound of rain brushing against her apartment window. Her room was dim, cluttered with sketches, empty coffee cups, and a laptop that had died sometime during the night. She sat up slowly, the events from last night playing like a faint echo in her mind. The rooftop bar, the laughter, that stranger with the calm voice and unreadable eyes. She shook her head, half amused, half embarrassed. Who even says things like that to a stranger? Maybe you've just been meeting the wrong rich men. It was ridiculous. He was probably just another smug finance guy trying to sound deep. But when she reached for her bag, her chest tightened. The small leather notebook she carried everywhere was gone. Her heart skipped. She turned the bag upside down, shook out the contents, but it was not there. The notebook was not just paper. It was her voice, her dream, her therapy. It was filled with sketches, quotes, and pages of what she wanted to turn into a podcast someday. A show called Please Her, Not Your Ego. She grabbed her jacket and ran through the drizzle to the subway, clutching her coffee like a lifeline. Maybe she had left it at the bar. Maybe the staff found it. The rooftop manager shook his head when she arrived, politely checking the lost and found box. Nothing. No notebook, no trace. Walking home through wet streets, Riley felt the sting of hopelessness bite harder than the cold. That notebook held months of her thoughts, raw, messy, real. Without it, her dream of making that podcast felt even further away. Back in her small apartment, she glanced at the bills pinned to the fridge, at the email reminder about her student loan payment. She had been living one rent check away from panic for months, and her latest freelance client had just delayed payment again. Later that night, her roommate knocked gently. "Hey, you okay?" Riley forced a smile. "Yeah, just tired." She wanted to tell someone about that man, about the way he had looked at her like she was worth listening to. But that felt too strange to say out loud. He was probably halfway across the city, sitting in some expensive office, forgetting the whole thing. While she tried to fall asleep, a memory of her father crept in. He used to say, "Money makes people comfortable, not kind." But he had left when comfort came. He remarried a woman with a mansion and 2 cars in the garage, and Riley and her mother had been left with overdue bills and broken promises. Since then, wealth had always meant distance. It was the wall she never wanted to climb again. The next morning, her alarm buzzed at 6. She tied her hair back, put on her apron, and walked into the coffee shop where she worked part-time. It smelled like cinnamon and espresso, but her body ached from the constant double shifts. The owner handed her a tray and said, "Morning, Riley, smile for the regulars." She smiled as always, even when it felt forced. Around 10, a young couple at the corner table argued about a bill. Riley stepped in, calm and polite, fixing the issue before it escalated. It was what she did best, hold things together while her own life fell apart quietly. Between orders, she stared out the window. Every time the door chimed, a small part of her hoped it was him, though she could not explain why. As she wiped the counter, her phone buzzed with a reminder, podcast submission deadline, 3 days left. She sighed. Without her notebook, there was nothing to submit. The world did not stop for lost dreams, she thought. It just kept spinning, indifferent. Across town, in a black car gliding past traffic, Adrian Cole flipped through the pages of that same notebook. He had read it twice, then a third time. There was something in her handwriting unpolished, funny, painfully honest, lines that made him smile and others that made him stop and think. If a man cannot sit with your no, he does not deserve your yes. He whispered the words, almost to himself. His assistant in the front seat glanced through the mirror. "Sir, the investor's lunch is at 1. Adrian nodded absently. "Reschedule it. I have something more interesting to do." He closed the notebook gently and placed it beside him. For the first time in a long while, he felt curious about a voice that was not filtered by money or expectations. He wanted to meet the woman behind those pages again. Not as a billionaire, not as a CEO, but as a man who had just realized that honesty could be more disarming than power. Back at the cafe, Riley leaned on the counter, eyes heavy from another long morning. The bell above the door rang, and she called out automatically, "Good morning. What can I get you?" But the man who stepped in was not a regular. He wore a gray hoodie, jeans, and the kind of quiet confidence that made people move aside without realizing it. He smiled faintly, his eyes familiar. "Black coffee," he said, and when she turned to pour it, he placed something on the counter, a small, worn leather notebook. Riley froze, her breath caught. She turned slowly, her heart beating faster than she wanted to admit. "I believe this belongs to you," he said, and in that single moment, every word she had written about men, money, and honesty suddenly became the start of something far more complicated than she ever imagined. For a moment, Riley could not move. The small leather notebook sat between them on the counter, the pages slightly wrinkled as if someone had turned through them more than once. She blinked hard, still trying to make sense of what she was seeing. "Where did you find this?" she finally asked, her voice low but trembling. The man smiled, calm, unhurried. "You dropped it last Friday. I was sitting right behind you." Riley's cheeks burned. She remembered her loud laugh, the bold words she had thrown into the air like a challenge. She opened the cover and saw the familiar handwriting, every page intact. He had not torn anything out or scribbled notes inside. It was untouched, but she could feel that he had read it. Her pulse raced with embarrassment. "So you read it?" He nodded slightly, not defensive. "I did. You write like someone who has been through enough to understand people." Riley tried to sound casual. "You mean I write like someone who complains about men too much?" He laughed softly. "Maybe, but I think you write like someone who still believes people can do better." There was something about the way he said it, steady, genuine, that made her lower her guard. She studied his face, trying to place him. He looked familiar, but not in the way rich men usually did. No polished arrogance, no gold watch, just dark eyes that seemed too thoughtful for a stranger. "I am Adrian," he said, extending his hand across the counter. "I work in tech, build things, listen to people complain about them later." Riley shook his hand carefully, half smiling. So, a problem solver? More like a professional listener, he replied. And you, Riley Moore, are better at telling truths than most focus groups I pay for. Her brows furrowed. You remembered my name? He pointed gently at the back cover. You wrote it there. Riley felt another wave of embarrassment. Right. So you read my entire manifesto about why men should stop pretending they understand women. He chuckled. Every word. It was honest, messy, and it made me think. She tried to sound indifferent. Glad to be your entertainment. Adrian shook his head. Not entertainment, insight. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small card. On it was a company name she did not recognize, and a neat logo that read Aurora Media Labs. I am helping build a new podcast platform, he explained. We are looking for real voices, not scripted content. I think your writing could be the start of something. Riley blinked. You mean, like, you want me to write for you? I want you to speak, he corrected. Record what you have been writing. We can give you a studio, technical help, and a fair pay. You keep full creative control. She stared at him, unsure if this was real. You do not even know me. Why would you offer that? Adrian's voice stayed calm. Because I believe people listen when someone is brave enough to tell the truth. And because your notebook did something most presentations never do, it made me stop and think. The bell above the cafe door rang again, letting in a gust of cold air and the smell of rain. Riley looked around, half expecting her manager to scold her for talking too long. She lowered her voice. If this is some marketing stunt, I am not interested. My story is not for sale. Adrian nodded. Fair. Then let us make a deal. No strings, no logo, no promises you do not approve. Just an idea. You come by the studio once. If you hate it, you walk away. She hesitated. Part of her wanted to say no, immediately. Men with big offers had always come with invisible costs. But there was something different in his tone. No push, no manipulation, just patience. Fine, she said slowly. One visit. But if it feels like a scam, I am walking out. Agreed, he said. Tomorrow at noon. When he left, Riley stood behind the counter for a long time, staring at the notebook he had returned. Her fingers brushed the leather cover as if it were proof that the universe had not completely forgotten her. For the first time in months, she felt a spark of curiosity instead of exhaustion. That evening, she opened her laptop and searched the company name. Nothing obvious came up. No billionaire, no corporate headlines. Just a few articles about new creative spaces in the city. Maybe he really was just a tech guy trying to build something new. The next day, she followed the address he had written on a slip of paper. The building looked nothing like she expected. Not a skyscraper, not glass and steel, but a converted warehouse filled with plants, murals, and soft light. Inside, people with laptops and coffee cups were editing videos and sound clips. A young woman at the front desk smiled. You must be Riley. Adrian is expecting you. Her heart pounded as she followed the hallway into a small studio lined with soundproof panels. Through the glass, she saw him, Adrian, wearing headphones, adjusting audio levels himself. He looked up, smiled, and waved her in. I was not sure you would come, he said. Riley crossed her arms lightly. Curiosity got the better of me. He gestured toward the microphone. Before we do anything official, I want you to try something. Read one paragraph from your notebook. Anything you like. She hesitated, then flipped open to a random page and read aloud. Being good in bed is not about skill. It is about safety. A woman relaxes when she feels seen, not when she feels conquered. The room went quiet. The soft hum of the recording equipment filled the silence. Adrian looked at her through the glass, his expression unreadable but deeply focused. When she finished, he said quietly, That is what people need to hear. For the first time, Riley did not roll her eyes or deflect. She just looked at him and said, almost whispering, Then let us see if they are ready to listen. Outside, the rain finally stopped, and sunlight slipped through the clouds, casting a faint glow across the studio floor, the beginning of something neither of them could name yet, but both could feel. The following weeks moved like scenes from a movie Riley never thought she would be in. Every morning, she would finish her shift at the cafe, change in the restroom, and take the train across the city to the small creative studio. It smelled like coffee and ambition laptops open, laughter echoing through glass walls, the hum of people chasing something that mattered to them. For once, she felt like she belonged in a space that was not built to keep her out. Adrian was there most days, always dressed simply, often with his sleeves rolled up, helping the team fix cables or rearrange recording setups. He never gave orders, never mentioned being anyone important. He just listened to her, to the sound engineers, even to interns who nervously shared opinions. That humility made him more mysterious. Their first official recording session was nerve-wracking. Riley sat in front of the microphone, her notebook open, her fingers trembling slightly. Adrian stood behind the glass, his expression calm, encouraging. She began reading her own words about modern relationships, vulnerability, and boundaries. Halfway through, her voice cracked with emotion, and she stopped. "I cannot do this," she whispered. "It sounds silly when I say it out loud." Adrian pressed the intercom button. "No, it sounds honest," he said. "That is what makes it powerful." She looked up, met his eyes through the glass, and took a deep breath before finishing the paragraph. When the session ended, he came into the room, carrying 2 cups of tea instead of coffee. He handed one to her and said, "I think people will hear themselves in your words." She smiled faintly. "Or they will think I am another woman complaining on the internet." "Then we will find the ones who understand first," he replied. Over the next few days, their routine became natural. They would brainstorm ideas on a whiteboard covered in sticky notes, laugh over silly phrases, and stay late editing sound. He asked questions that made her think differently about her own pain. "What made you stop trusting?" he asked one night while packing up equipment. Riley hesitated. "When I realized that being loved by someone powerful can make you disappear. They take up all the space, even when they do not mean to." Adrian was quiet for a long time. Then he said softly, "Maybe power is supposed to create space, not steal it." She looked at him curiously. "You sound like someone who learned that the hard way." He smiled faintly, almost sad. "You could say that." Outside, the city buzzed with neon signs and car horns. But inside the studio, it felt calm, 2 people from opposite worlds sharing silence that did not need to be filled. One evening, after recording a segment about emotional safety in relationships, Adrian offered to walk her to the subway. The streets glowed from a fresh rain, reflections of red and blue lights rippling on the pavement. They walked side by side, not touching, but close enough to feel the quiet pull between them. "You know," she said, glancing at him, "you do not talk much about yourself." He smiled. "Maybe I prefer to listen." "That is convenient," she teased. "I do enough talking for both of us." He laughed quietly. "It is the best part of my day." For the first time, Riley saw something different in him, warmth that was not polished or rehearsed. It made her curious and afraid at the same time. The following week, Adrian asked if she could stop by earlier to meet the creative director. When she arrived, she noticed new equipment in the studio, sleek branding on the walls that read, "Please her." Her heart jumped. "That is my phrase," she said softly. Adrian nodded. "It is the title of your series. The team loved it." She blinked in disbelief. "You used it already?" "I wanted to surprise you," he said. "It will help us pitch the project to sponsors." Something inside her hesitated. Sponsors, branding. Those words belonged to the world she had always avoided, the world of contracts and control. She nodded politely, pretending to be excited, but a small knot formed in her chest. Later that night, when everyone left, she stayed behind to review her recordings. Through the glass window, she saw Adrian sitting at his desk, typing on his laptop, unaware she was watching. For a moment, she wondered who he really was when he left this building. He had the grace of someone used to authority, the way he moved, the way people paused when he spoke. Yet he hid it behind that easy smile and gray hoodie. She walked into the control room and asked quietly, "Adrian, who are you when you are not here?" He looked up surprised. "I'm just someone trying to build something that lasts." She tilted her head. "That sounds rehearsed." He chuckled. "Then maybe I am just someone who does not like being defined by numbers in a bank account." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "That is a very specific thing to say." He met her gaze, unreadable. "Let us just say I have seen how money makes people forget what connection feels like." She smiled gently. "Then maybe you are not one of the bad ones." "Maybe I am still figuring it out," he said quietly. They packed up the last of the equipment in silence. Before leaving, he handed her a USB drive. "Keep a copy of everything we recorded. It is yours, no matter what happens." The gesture surprised her. Most people guarded content like treasure. "Why would you give this to me?" she asked. He shrugged. "Because it is your voice, not mine." When she stepped outside, the city air felt lighter. She tucked the USB drive into her pocket, smiling to herself. For the first time in years, she was not just surviving, she was creating. And though she still did not know the truth about the man named Adrian, she felt something she had not felt in a long time. Trust, quietly growing where fear used to live. Somewhere high above the skyline, lights blinked on in a tower marked Cole Media Labs, but Riley did not look up. She had no idea that her words were already echoing far beyond that small studio, and that the man who listened so carefully was the one holding the power to change her world forever. The launch day arrived faster than Riley expected. For weeks, she and Adrian had worked late nights perfecting each episode, fine-tuning sound, and crafting every line of the show's message. She thought it was going to be a small event, maybe just a few creators, a celebration of effort. But when she received the formal invitation, printed on heavy cardstock with gold edges, her hands trembled. The venue listed was the Grand Hall of the Fairmont Hotel, one of the most prestigious addresses in Manhattan. That morning, Riley stood in front of her mirror, smoothing out the wrinkles on a borrowed dress. Her roommate helped her pin her hair, whispering, "You are the face of the show now. Enjoy it." The words felt too big for her. She still thought of herself as the girl who made cappuccinos for impatient customers and dreamed about speaking her truth into a microphone. When she arrived at the hotel, she froze at the sight. Crystal chandeliers, a long red carpet, cameras, and elegantly dressed guests filled the lobby. She clutched her invitation tighter, feeling small again. An assistant guided her to a reserved seat near the front, right beneath a massive LED screen that displayed the new platform's logo. Aurora Media presents Real Voices, Real Power. As the lights dimmed, a promotional video began to play. Riley leaned forward when she heard her own voice echo across the hall. It was a clip from her pilot episode, the one she had recorded months ago when her hands were still shaking. Her words, raw and honest, now echoed from 100 speakers. Being good in bed is not about skill. It is about safety. A woman relaxes when she feels seen, not when she feels conquered. The audience applauded. Her throat tightened. She was proud, but also uneasy. No one had told her her voice would open the event. Then came the next slide. Her photo, her name, and the title "Please Her." A new generation of female voices. Her eyes widened. This was not just her project anymore. It was being branded as the company's flagship series. A host walked onto the stage, smiling at the crowd. And now, please welcome the man whose vision made this all possible, the founder and CEO of Cole Media Labs, Mr. Adrian Cole. The room erupted in applause as Adrian stepped onto the stage in a tailored suit. Riley's hands went cold. The name echoed through her head, Cole Media Labs, the same name she had seen on the skyline weeks ago. The man she thought was a simple tech worker was the billionaire behind one of the biggest media empires in the country. She sat frozen as he took the microphone. He looked calm, charismatic, the picture of power and control. He began to speak about innovation, honesty, and giving a voice to the unheard. Then his tone softened. This platform began with a conversation in a bar, he said. The audience chuckled. A woman laughed and said, "Rich men do not know how to please a woman." A ripple of laughter spread through the room. Riley's stomach dropped. He continued, "That woman challenged me to listen, and her courage became the heart of what we built tonight." The spotlight found her face in the crowd. People turned to look, smiling, clapping. To them, it was inspirational. To her, it was betrayal. She felt the blood rush to her ears, heat building behind her eyes. Every private word, every personal line from her notebook had become part of a public brand speech. He had used her story, the very pain she had trusted him with, to make himself look noble. Before the applause ended, she stood and walked out. No one stopped her. The doors closed behind her with a dull thud that echoed louder than any cheer inside. In the hallway, her breath came in sharp, angry bursts. The sound of the party faded behind her as she walked faster, heels clicking on marble. A voice called after her. "Riley, wait!" She turned. Adrian was there, still in his suit, tie slightly loose, eyes desperate. "Let me explain," he said. "You lied," she cut in. Her voice shook, but it was steady enough to hurt. "You knew who you were. You knew what your company was. You let me think you were someone else. I wanted you to see me without the title," he said quietly. "I did see you," she snapped, "and I liked that version. The man who listened, not the one who turned my pain into a keynote speech." He took a step closer. "I did not mean to exploit you." "Then why am I standing out here alone while you were in there taking credit for my words?" He had no answer. The silence between them was louder than the applause that continued inside. Riley shook her head. You prove me right, Adrian. Rich men still do not know how to please a woman. They only know how to please their egos. She walked away before he could respond, the sound of her footsteps fading into the city night. For the first time in a long time, her voice trembled not with fear, but with anger strong enough to finally protect herself. For days after the gala, Riley disappeared from everything that connected her to Adrian or the company. She stopped answering messages, blocked work emails, and deleted the app that used to ping her studio schedule. The anger had burned hot at first, but what came after was worse, a hollow silence that filled her small apartment like heavy air. Every time she walked past the coffee shop where she used to work, she felt safer among the smell of espresso and chatter of customers who did not know her name. No cameras, no contracts, no spotlight, just normal. But every time she saw a podcast ad on social media, with her voice echoing words she had once whispered into a microphone, her stomach twisted. She had wanted to tell her truth, not become a story for someone else's redemption. At night, she sat by the window with her laptop, trying to write again. The words came out bitter, defensive, unfinished. Until one evening, she opened a blank document and wrote the title, "This is not his story." It was her way of taking back what she had lost. She recorded her first episode alone, using a cheap microphone she had ordered online. Her voice shook at first, but it grew steadier with every sentence. She spoke about how it feels to trust the wrong person, how even good intentions can become control when power is uneven. When she uploaded it to a small independent platform, she did not expect anyone to listen. But within a few days, hundreds of comments appeared. Women wrote from every state saying, "You said what I have been too scared to say." For the first time, her story was hers again. Meanwhile, across the city, Adrian sat in his office long after his team had gone home. The glass windows of Cole Media Labs reflected a man who no longer recognized himself. He played Riley's independent podcast through his headphones. Her words cut deep not because they were cruel, but because they were true. He heard the pain in her tone when she said, "He was kind, until kindness turned into control." He paused the recording and closed his eyes. The truth was, he had wanted to prove he was different from the men she distrusted. But in trying to show that, he had used the very tools of power she feared most. The next morning, he sent an email to his board. Suspend all promotional material for Please Her, effective immediately. He deleted the scheduled interviews, canceled sponsor deals, and called his PR team to issue a statement. "Our platform's mission is to amplify authentic voices. We failed to do that for one of our creators. That mistake ends today." Then, for the first time since the night of the gala, he wrote Riley a message. It was only one line. "I am sorry. I will not ask to be forgiven, but I hope to earn the right to listen again." He did not send it. Instead, he printed it, folded it, and placed it in the same notebook he had once returned to her. Later that week, he found out where she recorded her podcast. It was a small cafe after closing hours. Its back room turned into a makeshift studio with 2 chairs and an old microphone. That evening, Riley arrived early to prep for her next recording. When she pushed open the door, she saw a folded note sitting beside the mic. It was the same notebook, now worn and soft at the edges. Inside, his handwritten message read, "If you ever need equipment, I can provide it. If you need silence, I can give that too. I just want to make sure your story keeps going." She stared at it for a long time. Part of her wanted to tear it up, to reject every piece of him that had hurt her. But another part remembered the man who had sat behind glass, quietly listening as she found her voice for the first time. That night, she recorded a new episode. Her voice was calm but full of truth. "I used to think power and love could not exist in the same room," she said. "But maybe power becomes love when it learns to listen." Across the street, unseen, Adrian sat in his car, listening through his phone. He did not go in. He did not interrupt. He just listened. Really listened, for the first time. And in that quiet moment, somewhere between guilt and grace, both of them began to understand that forgiveness is not about forgetting, but about allowing growth to take the place of pain. Weeks passed, and Riley's small podcast began to grow in ways she never imagined. Listeners sent stories, voice notes, and handwritten letters. Women from different backgrounds shared how they had found courage through her honesty. Every episode started with the same line, "This is not his story. It is ours." She no longer recorded from the cafe. A local community center offered her a small room with better acoustics and real recording panels. It was still humble, but it felt sacred hers alone. One evening, After finishing an episode about rebuilding trust, she found an envelope on the doorstep. No return name, only the words, "For Riley Moore." Inside was a short letter and a check. The letter read, "No logo, no contracts, no strings. Use it to expand what you have built. I want to help quietly. A listener." The check was large enough to cover equipment, rent, and future projects. She knew who had sent it. Her chest tightened, a mix of gratitude and hesitation. He was keeping his word, helping, but staying silent. That weekend, she recorded another episode. Her tone was softer this time. "Sometimes," she said into the microphone, "the people who hurt us are the same people who teach us what accountability should look like. It is not about grand apologies. It is about consistent actions that rebuild what words broke." She paused, letting the silence speak for her. Listeners later said it was the most emotional episode she had ever done. A few weeks later, the community center invited her to speak at an event about storytelling and empowerment. Riley hesitated but agreed. When the night came, the small auditorium filled with creators, students, and ordinary people who had followed her journey. As she stepped up to the microphone, she saw a familiar figure standing quietly in the back. Adrian. He was not dressed like a CEO. Just a man in a simple black sweater, holding a cup of coffee, listening. Their eyes met for a brief moment, and she felt the rush of the past collide with the calm of the present. No anger this time, no fear, just recognition. During the Q&A, a young woman asked, "Do you think people can really change?" Riley smiled faintly. "Yes," she said, "but change only counts when it does not ask for applause." After the event, Adrian waited outside under the soft glow of streetlights. When Riley walked out, he handed her a small card, no words, just an address and a time. "Tomorrow night," he said quietly, "if you want to talk." Then he walked away before she could answer. The next evening, curiosity pulled her to that address. It was a small cafe near the river, closed for a private event. Inside, a few people were arranging tables, setting up microphones and lights. On the wall was a handwritten sign. "Rich Men Listen. Open Forum Night." Adrian stood near the back greeting volunteers. When he saw her, his expression softened. He spoke to the group. "Tonight, this is not about me. It is about hearing women's voices without interruption. I will not speak. Only listen." He stepped aside and took a seat among the audience. Riley watched as women, one by one, shared stories, some about love, some about loss, all about truth. Adrian listened quietly, never defending, never explaining. For the first time, she saw not a billionaire trying to fix things, but a man finally learning to be still. When the event ended, their eyes met again across the room. No words were needed. Riley realized that maybe forgiveness had already happened, not in a single moment, but in the quiet act of both of them choosing to keep showing up. The following months unfolded quietly, but everything began to shift. After the Rich Men Listen event, word spread across social media. Clips of women sharing their truths went viral, not because they were shocking, but because they were real. People started asking who organized it, but Adrian refused to step into the spotlight. He let Riley and the community take the credit. Riley's podcast, This Is Not His Story, became a small movement. She collaborated with other female creators, hosted workshops at community centers, and raised funds for local shelters. Every time she walked into a recording room, she carried a calm confidence that had replaced her old fear. Her listeners could hear it too, the way her voice had changed from guarded to grounded. One afternoon, she received a call from a foundation that wanted to partner with her for a national series about healing and dignity. It was the kind of opportunity that could change her career forever. Still, she hesitated. She remembered what it felt like to lose control of her voice once before. So before signing anything, she called Adrian. They met at the same small cafe near the river. He arrived early, already sitting by the window, a notebook in front of him. When she entered, he stood up but did not rush to speak. "Congratulations," he said softly. "You earned this." Riley smiled politely. "Thank you, but I wanted to ask you something first." He nodded, waiting. She slid the contract across the table. "They want you listed as an advisor. Did you know about this?" Adrian looked genuinely surprised. "No, I had nothing to do with it." Riley studied him for a moment, searching for any trace of the man she once thought she knew. All she saw was honesty. "Then I want to offer you something," she said. He raised an eyebrow. "Not a partnership, not a contract, just a seat at the table. You can help design the mentorship part for young men. The idea came from you, after all. Adrian's expression softened. Only if it stays yours, Riley. She smiled. It always will. They spent the afternoon planning. He listened as she spoke about empathy, storytelling, and boundaries. At one point he asked, "Do you ever regret meeting me?" Riley thought for a long moment before answering. "I used to," she said quietly. "But if I had not met you, I might never have found my voice. Pain taught me what pride never could." Adrian nodded slowly, as if the words carried a weight he understood deeply. When they finished, she stood to leave. He reached into his pocket and handed her a folded envelope. "No logos this time," he said with a small smile. "Just something I wrote." Inside, in neat handwriting, were the words, "To please a woman is not to impress her. It is to understand her. Thank you for teaching me that." That night, Riley mentioned him briefly in her new episode. Not by name, not as a love story, but as a lesson. She said, "Healing is not about returning to what broke you. It is about transforming the space between two people until both can stand there without pain." Across town, Adrian listened from his apartment. No spotlight, no audience, just the quiet hum of her voice filling the room. And for the first time, he felt peace instead of guilt. Outside, the city lights glowed against the water, and two people who had once collided in chaos now moved through the same world with gentleness, each knowing that some stories do not need an ending, they just need understanding. A year later, the city looked different, or maybe Riley simply saw it differently now. The skyline that once made her feel small now reminded her of growth, the kind that came quietly, one truth at a time. Her podcast had turned into a full movement with live events, mentorship programs, and a foundation supporting women in creative work. Every step of the journey carried the same message, that dignity and kindness could exist on equal ground. On the anniversary of her very first episode, she decided to host a small celebration at the same rooftop bar where everything began. It felt poetic to return to the place where she had once laughed too loudly and challenged the world without meaning to. The bar looked the same. Golden lights, the sound of glasses clinking, the view of Manhattan stretching endlessly into the night. Her friends and team gathered around, raising glasses to toast the milestone. Someone asked her to make a short speech. She smiled, the city breeze lifting her hair. "A year ago," she began, "I said something I thought was just a joke. I said rich men do not know how to please a woman. What I did not know was that the universe was listening, and it sent someone to prove me wrong in the most unexpected way." People laughed softly, but her tone carried warmth, not sarcasm. She continued, "This year taught me that pleasing someone has nothing to do with money or power. It means showing up, listening, and being brave enough to change. And sometimes, it means forgiving yourself for the person you used to be." When she finished, the crowd applauded gently. As she stepped away from the table, she noticed a familiar figure standing by the balcony railing, holding 2 cups of coffee instead of champagne. Adrian. He looked up as she approached, his smile quiet and real. "Still drinking coffee at a bar?" she teased. "Old habits," he said, handing her a cup. "Thought we should finish the story where it started." They stood side by side, looking out over the glittering skyline. "So," he said softly, "do you still believe what you said that night?" Riley smiled, taking a sip. "No. I believe rich men can learn if they stop trying to buy everything and start listening instead." He laughed under his breath. "Then I am still learning." For a moment, silence settled comfortably between them. Not the kind of silence that hides pain, but the kind that feels safe. Riley glanced down at the ring of coffee on the table beside them. On it, Adrian had placed a small wrapped box. She opened it carefully and found a miniature replica of her first leather notebook, engraved with the words, "Your voice changed everything." Her eyes softened. "You kept every promise, didn't you?" He nodded. "I tried. You taught me that keeping promises is better than keeping control." They did not kiss or make grand gestures. They simply stood there, 2 people who had broken and rebuilt themselves in front of each other. The music faded into the background as Riley whispered, "You know, I am glad I said that line out loud. Because if I had not, you would have never turned around." He smiled. "And I would have never learned what it means to please a woman the right way." The city lights shimmered across their faces, and in that moment, the laughter, the pain, the lessons, all of it felt worth it. Riley looked out at the skyline, her voice steady and full of peace. "Some stories start with mistakes," she said, "but the best ones end with understanding." And as the night wind carried her words away, Their story, the fated mistake that began with a laugh, finally came full circle, not with perfection but with grace.